Welcome to Camp Panther and Cage. Good evening, everyone. Give me one moment. Take care of that speaker. No sound works. I'm trying to set the settings for public. So as soon as I can do that, I do believe it's set for public. So I am going to go ahead with part two. Yeah, edit this. Yep, there it is. Okay. So welcome to Consequences of Breaking Down the Black Family Structure. This will be part two of a three-part series. I hope to be three parts, so I can conclude it next week. But this is a community conversation inspired by Dr. Francis Cress Welsing's elaboration on the devastating results of the breaking down of the Black family structure, or removal of the father. Now, as I said, it's the second part of a community-driven live stream where we are going to speak on this subject from a unique Afrocentric perspective. I'm your host, and our focus here is to expose the negative narratives that continue to perpetuate social and cultural bigotry within the Brevard County community specifically. But as we exploit these narratives that seemingly suffocate the minds of the members of our society, members who attempt to maintain racially hostile environments, real-time feedback in the form of your comments within that live stream are always encouraged to help us expose those negative narratives. Okay. And I want to request that those comments that you leave tonight or any other night will be relevant to keep conversation um, extremely coherent. Okay. Now, as we share those real time comments, then you will contribute to the conversation. So, of course, like I said, you're welcome to contribute to what is going to be progressive, deemed as progressive discussions. And then eventually they really do produce tangible solutions. So if you're your first time joining us, I hope that you enjoy and I hope you're able to participate. First thing I'm going to go ahead and say is tonight's live stream was a very fluid one. I had to postpone it. I had to deal with a few other issues, such as trying to review some more data and some more statistics. I didn't find a lot of information that I wanted to really share with you, but I wanted to double check and make sure that everything was absolutely kind of correct and uh, able to, so we can move forward. So I'm going to go ahead and show you a video so you can see the comments, so we can break down her comments, at least the second part of her comments, and from there I'll go ahead and we'll start the review. Okay.
You see, families have to have mothers and fathers. If you take, if you take one father out of a neighborhood, you see, then the child who doesn't have a father can make up the difference with the other fathers. But when you take 90% of the fathers out by a dynamic, you see, you have really crippled the entire people. So that when the father is removed and he cannot play the role as breadwinner, and the mother play the role as, the support giver of the emotional well-being of the children, then you're going to produce certain kinds of behavioral aberrations. If the mother is forced to be the breadwinner as well as the giver of emotional supports, do you see, then the emotional supports go wanting. You can produce depression. Do you see, if a mother, if that balance is not there, the father as the breadwinner, the mother as the primary emotional support of the developing child, if that's not in place, then you can produce symptoms of depression in children. Now, if children are depressed, these are some of the things that they will do. If children are suffering depression and dependency deprivation, they will become preoccupied with sex prematurely, and so therefore we get teenage pregnancy. They will not have the necessary emotional supports to tackle academic work, so we get school dropouts. A sufficient degree of depression, somebody says, well, here, if you drink this, you won't feel so bad, little boy. Or if you take this drug, you won't feel so bad. You'll feel real cool. Do you see? And so that's the way I say that we get teenage pregnancy, we get school dropping out, and we get use of drugs. If you take large numbers of fathers out of a community and male children do not have fathers to model their behavior after and to lean against so that they gain strength and confidence in themselves as male children, then you will have children forming together in gangs. You see, engaging in destructive activity.
Okay, so that was audio of a post or a repost that I shared from a reel a couple of weeks ago by content creator, our brother Joshua. And that content featured the late Dr. Cress Welsing. She was a psychiatrist, and as you can see, she was elaborating on the breakdown of the Black family structure. And what we did was we examined the context of some of the concepts that she shared last week. And so we're going to continue with that tonight. The concepts last week were concepts of sex role paternalization, because families demand a very critical need for mothers and fathers. Concepts like how a community must do well to embrace every child through the "it takes a village to raise a child" philosophy. So concepts like understanding the importance of sociology of Black/African Americans so that we're informed of the nuances that impact and influence the community's behaviors. How those concepts reveal one of the unconscious motivations behind violence specifically committed by some of the Broward County youth we hope to get to. But we wanted to actually expose that and reveal that and the nexus between that violence and the economic development of the surrounding areas. And before I continue, let me give a shout out to one of the, I don't know if I should say his name, but Mr. Brown for sharing some of the economic developments that continue to happen within the cocoa community. It's very, I am informed by those, and that's very, I want to say, very, very courageous of you to be able to do that. And I thank you for taking on that responsibility and being able to share that. That does reach my news feed before most others, before I see it professionally. I usually am on this 3-day lag, so I won't see a lot of stuff for 3 days. But that could be because I'm closer to the Melbourne, Palm Bay area, because when the breaking news just happened of those 2 officers that were shot, I did receive that as it was happening. I was being able to receive all that information. So continuing on, I see you, Amber. I'll get right to your comment in just a moment. I tried to neatly present all the information that I reviewed last week with the African proverb, "The child who isn't embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth." Now, you may not understand how that has a connotation or how that is relevant, but if we'll continue on tonight, at the end of tonight, you'll see how it's relevant. But we began exploring deindustrialization's community impact on the nuclear Black family structure last week. We discussed their ineligibility for social insurance programs while white nuclear families were supplemented. And finally, residency requirements. We talked briefly about that and how that forced many Black fathers out of the nuclear Black family structure. And I know this is a very controversial subject, but we're hoping next week we'll add the nuance to that of why that eventually did impact the families. So we lightly addressed that cumulatively. that there were all these detrimental effects that developed as a consequence to the historical and social and systemic policies. All those policies that excluded the Black African American. Okay. Now we zipped up last week's presentation to a conclusion with the expression of the vital need for our Black community to interpersonally discuss these factors, and that's what this is supposed to represent. It's supposed to represent a community-driven live stream where we can even have discussions or even discussions offline. And I hope to maybe have one if I can zip this up in an hour and 15. That's the time schedule. It was actually an hour and 13, but we'll try to see if we can work with that. I knew I would have some technical issues. So, but we're supposed to discuss all these issues interpersonally so that we can have resolution, so that we can at least be a part of a network that is looking to find a resolution or find a resource that will be available so that we can stop some of the stuff that's happening. And I say that because when it comes down to it, for us, a couple of years ago, it was Black fathers. And people don't understand when they use that terminology, when they use those narratives, it does have an impact on us, Black fathers like me, when we walk into organizations applying for a job. You know, we can't shake the national, we should be able to, and I want to be positive about this, but I'm the most likely is what I'm saying is there's a lot of this stuff that we can't shake. And I know we can't shake it because we have issues with our society. And you're not going to say we're better than that. No, excuse me. And I'm going to take you back real quick. We had this claim that we were a post-racial America. But remember, America had a problem with a little biracial girl, if you want to use that term biracial, on a Cheerios commercial. Okay? This was an issue. And of course, the Cheerios administrators of Cheerios said that it was only a sliver of society, but we can see that it's more than a sliver. Okay? So we're dealing with that kind of issues. So I know that, you know, you may not see it, don't feel it, but I wouldn't expect you to if you are not a person of color or a Black man. Okay? For us who are Black, we do happen to engage it almost on a daily, and we can understand if you're smart enough, you'll be able to even see it, you know, or fish it out through conversation. So give me 1 second, Amber. But anyway, we tried to wrap that up. We wanted to basically hit the note that we in the Black community to interpersonally discuss all these factors that we were reviewing last week and how those factors cultivate the single motherhood culture. Okay, that same single motherhood culture where phony wannabe Black elite figures. How you doing? Black elite figures like Jason Whitlock and Shamika Michelle, I believe, but they use those that single Black motherhood culture. They use that to exploit the best interest of the collective Black African American community, and they do that for opportunities so they can climb a rung on the social ladder. Now, I give the viewing audience a past example of how relevant bringing Jason Whitlock and the Black Boule up last week, and I'll do that in the beginning. Well, maybe not the beginning of the discussion next week, but I will reference them in the beginning, and I will go in deeper with that. Okay, next week we'll actually talk about it because we've seen it before, but I'll show it. So, but let's jump right into where we left off at the conclusion of last week's live stream and where that left us, and that was dealing with the critical nexus between deindustrialization, racism, and urban crisis. Okay, so give me a second before we get into that. I'm going to go ahead and put this comment up on the screen because I know one of our frequent viewers, one of our loyal viewers from the very beginning, made a comment. And I wanted to go ahead and put that on the screen. So what if the father is broken and not a good example? Ooh, you all the way in next week. I'll give you a preview now. So one of the reasons why the father may be broken is because of what effort and what energy we put into that father currently. If you actually look, and I'll go into some theoretical stuff here, but if you actually look at fathers, good fathers, they never really quit on their children. They never really quit. Those who are quitting are a different kind of breed, and we'll talk about who raised them, how that is. We're actually going to go into it tonight. We'll talk about the Willie Lynch letter, and I'll show you how something from that past has impacted this to the now. Now everybody will get upset by that, but here's the deal: you're talking to me here. This is Anthony. You are not going to try to talk me down with some garbage. Okay, I'm just going to put it like that. I'm trying to be nice with Black people. This is a fact. Slavery has impacted our diet. Okay. A long time ago, I brought to you the biggest first example. It was a plantation plate. And I remember there was about 125 people in the room. Once I started showing the plantation plate, it dropped down to like 60. Because you don't want to hear this fact. Okay. So here's a fact of where it negatively impacted our community. And to this day, we got some grandmas that they can sling some ham hocks, but know that we don't need to be eating that. Not when we lead in heart disease or whatnot. Our diets are impacted from slavery. Okay. So know that what I'm going to talk about in the Willie Lynch letter tonight, briefly, know that that is also employed in a different way. It's a different form, but it is the same thing. And you'll get to understand that. So getting back to the Black father that's broken, you have to look into why this father's broken. You have to, before you even have the child, you need to find out what motivates that person, what they feel, what their family philosophy is. Because here's the deal. And I normally say the Black woman because I'm Black. Okay. So I don't really say for white women. Okay. I can't speak for that. So what I'm saying is, as the Black woman, you can't give up on the Black man, and the Black man should not give up on the Black woman. Because of our unique history, we have a history that no one else in the world has ever endured. There are some people who say that they endured slavery, and it's not. It's different. There are some who say that they endured indentured servitude. It's not slavery. There were never any slave sex farms or breeding farms for the Irish. Okay, and we'll debate that in the future. But we have a unique history, and so therefore, because of this setting, because of how systemic policies have been put in place to bring us down, we have to understand that if we give up on each other, that's what's going to produce brokenness. So if you have a broken father, currently, there might be something that you need to do, as such as contact them, talk about where your expectations are, how they may have failed your expectations, and then try to see if you can reconnect. Because one of the most important things, even if the relationship between the mother and the father isn't as strong as it used to be, or isn't one that's based on love, or based on this idea that that started the relationship or started the union in the first place, those children are innocent and they don't have a say. So they need their fathers and their mothers to continue to work together. Now, there are some instances, because I know personally, I have a personal incident, where there's some issues and incidents where one time someone does something and they have to be cut off. I get that. And that's because of something I understand and I can say it. And a lot of people will say, no, well, I recovered from drugs, blah, 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 blah. That's debatable. That's subjective. For my family and for me, I don't acquiesce. I don't sugarfoot around it. If you bring drugs around my children, it's done deal. It's just not happening. Undebatable. That's one of those things that I don't put up with. You continue to say, do you continue to allow them to influence the children just for the sake of having a father? Depends on what kind of influence you're talking about. Now, that's where you got to sit together with that parent and you have to actually discuss and say, hey, the influence that you're producing on the children or whatnot, or the child or children, they're producing negative results. And I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to get involved with, this pattern. And that's what usually happens. It's not that one parent does something wrong or something. It's when there's a habitual pattern that's set up. When the pattern's set up, that's when you got to put your foot down. That's when you got to stop it, because what we don't see, and I say we, because I have seen certain things because of members of my family from past stuff so I had someone that abused drugs in my family, and I know where that ends up. I know where it currently ends up. So therefore, that's why I have this standard of no. Okay. But sometimes we don't see where these patterns lead, and sometimes these patterns lead to other issues. Now, tonight we're going to discuss. Hopefully, I can get through it. But tonight we're going to discuss about one of the patterns that sets up in children. So it is there's a fact, there's some research that says that by age 14 is when the children start to develop psychological depression and stuff like this. So if you have a broken home or a broken situation, if the patterns are established, what it may do is it may actually set up the child for the episodes of depression and symptoms uh, of mental health issues in the future. So when you say something about finding a replacement father, um, if you have to find another figure, that is fine. Um, that's the whole point of taking the village philosophy, okay? Because and you'll see why. I'll explain. I will go back and I will talk about this as in the village philosophy, because and I'll go ahead and give you a quick example. You'll find tonight I'm going to say later on about the children giving access to drugs. Now, here's the deal. Most of the time, what they found through research is that the children get access to drugs, and they actually will abuse those drugs with their friends. So if their friends have access to drugs, your children have access to drugs. If your children have access to drugs, all of their friends have access to drugs. So how do you stop that? That means I'm getting on the phone with Amber, and I'm like, Martin said that he's staying the night over your house, blah, blah, blah. What's the story? And then you're back to me, you're like, yo, Anthony, my son said that they're not staying the night at my house, they're staying the night at your house. Then you find out, oh, wait a minute, they got some game running. That's how you get involved in that. So that only works when you got a network. I had a family member, it's a friend, my best friend, but he's like my brother. And so we used to hang out. But if I was going over to his house, my mom was on the phone with his dad, and they were clarifying. He was on the phone with his mom. My mom was on the phone with his mom, and she was clarifying. So you couldn't be in Gil McJeezy's house. That was my mom's name. You couldn't be in Gil McJeezy's house and her not know what was going on. So that's why a lot of people are like, well, he didn't hang out here too long. That's right, because you don't want Gil McJeezy coming through. She ain't gonna come through with the bathrobe and the bed slippers, whatever. But she's been known to kick in a few doors. So I just give you all that. My mom didn't play that. So I had to make sure that I was inside when the time was designated. So we didn't play around with that. But the only way you beat that, or the only way you get into that, is that you establish a network with these parents, right? The other thing is in that understanding that concept, finding a replacement father in that kind of sense or whatnot. Yet we talk about it all the time. We say find a mentor, right? Some of the children still need mentors, even though they have their father. They may need another positive figure. Now, traditionally, this was the pastor in the church. These are other members of authority in the church. We don't have that as much anymore, and there are other issues, other nuances that surround that. So I just wanted to just basically put that out there. I know there's a lot. I didn't want to hold back since you asked that question. I know you probably have some stuff to do tonight. It's a Wednesday night, but probably the best night for me. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on with the show. But thank you for your question. Thank you for submitting that. I'm glad I'm able to answer that. If you feel that I need to elaborate a little more, go ahead and get in the comment section and let me know. All right. So as I said, we were talking about what we covered last week, and we stopped at the deindustrialization. All right. So here's the deal. While I was researching last week, give me a second. Let me. So while I was researching in preparation, actually about 2 weeks ago, I found this PDF that with among others, but I just thought I wanted to do this one. I found this PDF titled "Critical Nexus of Deindustrialization, Racism, and Urban Crisis in Post-1967 Detroit." So if you understand the Civil Rights Movement in post-1967 or 1967 Detroit, you'll know that there was some rioting, and I will term that was riots. Okay. And that's because sometimes when it's a massacre, they like to term it as a riot to say that both sides are a whole responsibility as opposed to accepting responsibility. So what was in Detroit was designated a riot. Now it held such profound relevance, that PDF held such profound relevance because of the crime that has been notoriously documented in cities like Chicago, Los Angeles, Baltimore. We'll talk about Baltimore later on tonight. I hope that you're still here by that time, and Detroit. Okay, we know that whenever there's a subject associated to the black on black crime narrative, or anytime that narrative is erected, there are particular areas in America that receive the most scrutiny. And those are the areas like Chicago and Detroit. They're always thrown into the conversation without understanding the actual history of those particular areas, or remember I told you context is important. The context of how those areas became populated with the African Americans, right? So I'm going to read a few a few lines, or a few paragraphs from the final pages of that PDF to reorientate us back into this week's conclusion of Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, elaborating on the devastating results of breaking down the Black family structure by removal of the father. Last week, I mentioned confident but reluctant community members who cannot seem to connect the relevant dots between the rise of a violent crime committed, especially the rise in violent crime that was committed here in Brevard County, by the youth, and then the economic development. Okay, even though there was a relevant link between the two concepts, right? So the critical nexus of deindustrialization, racism, and urban crisis in post-1967 Detroit states, hear me out, that racism has been a persistent part of American society since America's inception. Okay, I don't think anyone with integrity could really disagree with that or minimize that. Some people have tried. They can't minimize the fact that it has shaped everything from the demography of major American cities to the almost second nature response, like that Cheerios commercial I was talking about, of white women who hold their purses tight even when they're around Black youth. Okay, now we know that that's an issue because we see it all the time in videos. Yes, there are videos that may be far and few between, but keep in mind, I've had 3 Karen interactions in the past year. Okay, so it happens, doesn't happen to you, but it happens to me. It happens to other African American males that I know. Okay, so we know that these videos aren't just separated, right? Now, racist ideologies are present within America, and they're present within the media. Okay, Vivek, yeah, he's shown evidence, but it's revealed every day that those racist ideologies are comfortably settled within the minds of arguably majority of Americans within this country. Okay, that's statistic. Okay, now the PDF cites that the American brand of racism even attaches itself quickly to the minds of foreigners who have never seen anything like it in their native lands. But I'm going to disagree with that respectfully, because I know that the most likely reason behind foreigners' minds quickly adapting to that American brand of racism is because there is an inherent anti-Blackness that has come from the history of the world. Okay, that's why I said it's inherent, right? And its indifference seems to permeate cultures across the globe. All right. We saw an example of this in Asia, from the lightening of the skin that goes on in India. Okay. There's a huge colorism issue there. There's a huge colorism issue that occurs in China. It's not as big, but it's subtle, but it exists in China and in Japan. Okay. Now, even Aboriginals in Australia, the Aboriginals were annihilated. We know why that was, right? Okay. We saw an example of what I'm talking about, as in foreign cultures having this anti-Blackness. We saw an example of that in the Ukraine when they allowed dogs to board the train while the authorities kicked Black people. They kicked Black people out of the line, those who were waiting to board the trains, those same trains. So they let the dogs get on, they let the dogs escape before, all the fighting began. And they would, they put the Black people after the dogs. Now, you see what I'm saying? So we saw this in South Africa too, where apartheid still to this day has an impact, which disparages the indigenous people. All right. Now the same situation is even evident in Guinea right now, currently. Okay. Let me get you something real quick so you can not thinking I'm just talking. Right. I'm working a little slow here. I was trying to connect it to the Ethernet, but it wouldn't give it to me. It decided it wanted me to use the Wi-Fi. So it's kind of slow and it's kind of lagging a little bit. So you'll see me between two of the screens operating this. But all right, there we go. Now, that's what I was saying earlier about, foreign natives adapting to that mentality of racism that we see. Um, that's why, and I said this, it's not odd. It's not odd for them, and there's an inherent, anti-blackness that's practiced. But that's why we saw, or why it was only controversial to see what you're seeing here on the screen, how the Haitian immigrants were treated when they were met on the southern border with the border patrol agents who were riding on horseback, and they were beating them with these saddle straps, which was reminiscent of the colonial American overseers, which were using bullwhips on slaves. And we can see this image, and this image was not, considered as it wasn't considered worthy of contempt. It's hard to say that, but I mean the truth is the truth. Okay, give me 1 second. Gotta get the next image up. It kind of crapped on me for a second. Now, I want to talk about the saddle straps. And those are just two of the images. Um, but we know that this has an impact on America. Okay. We know that globally, this has had an impact on America itself, right? It fuels the fringe elements abroad, overseas, who attempt to create a white ethno state. I'm talking about Ukrainians, okay? And we'll get into that in the future. So if you want to debate that, get your guns loaded, bring them. And then in America, let me say it. I just said get your guns ready. What I mean is like your information. I do not mean literally. Do not. I'm not advocating violence in any way. All right, I have to say that because I know that this is being streamed to YouTube, and I know sometimes it's very controversial. And I do not mean physical guns. I meant like get your information ready. Okay. Apologize for anybody who misconceived what I was just trying to communicate. But like I said, that kind of racism fuels the endorsement of accepting American exceptionalism as a rational standard. Okay. Now, get this off the screen. I just want to show that to you. There's more proof and more evidence of what I'm talking about. It's not want to work with me here. Not today. That's okay. Getting back to it, the PDF goes on to say that racism is not solely a rural phenomenon. It states that early urban centers experienced their own blend of institutional and symbolic racism, and it's apparent in high rates of unemployment, crime, and high school dropouts within these cities. Okay, so keep in mind, high rates of unemployment. That's where the deindustrialization comes from. Crime, we're going to talk about that towards the end of tonight. And then high school dropouts, we'll be talking about that in the middle, right? So this is why it's relevant. Now, it states that nearly every social issue in American society is the result of some blend of racism and classism. I 100% believe that. Um, some blend of racism and classism that promises that one group will always surpass another in terms of economic success, political power, and equality. when racism is considered in the context of industrialized and later deindustrialized America, it's an interesting tension that develops between the autonomous individuals who believe to be their basic human rights and what the reality actually is. The tension can create enough unrest and motivate an outcry like the one that is described in the case of the 1967 Detroit riot. Okay. Now, remember I mentioned the Kerner Commission last week, right? Go check out last week's video to understand the details of that, or do the research yourself. Now, outcries like the 1967 Detroit riot, however, do not resolve the deep issues of racism and the remnants of deindustrialization. Okay. They do, however, bring to the forefront some of the issues, and those issues, and how for others they simply just reaffirm the ideology that African Americans are hell bent on destroying American society. I have always said that protests like this, like last summer or the summer of 2020, the protests were justified because they had the intention to bring those issues associated with racism to the forefront for resolution. Right? The 1967 riot left its footprint on Detroit, both economically and socially. This footprint follows years of tracks left by both racism and deindustrialization. And this research within that PDF, and I can send that to you if you want to. If you want it, send me a message in my DMs this week. I'll send that to you. But the research within that PDF has determined that all three of these incidences, two continuous and one abrupt, have most certainly been the most significant factors in Detroit's urban crisis since 1967. Now, it can also be found in speaking with individuals who lived through the riot. Many will tell you that things just weren't the same since 1967. So it directly mentions how empirical evidence is used to understand the nexus between deindustrialization, racism, and urban crisis, and how even though the riot brought racial issues to the forefront, it also reaffirmed this racist ideology that Black African Americans are inherently destructive, and that, and every excuse to socially classify these African Americans in an unofficial subhuman category. Okay, such was the crux that began this recent salivating about the war on woke. Okay, now the PDF goes on to say that the research is certainly not exhaustive. It is the expressed intention of this research to develop the effective framework for exploring this issue further and to consider the many aspects that shape societies, placing special emphasis on historical precedents and how these historical precedents and aspects worked to create the present situation. Okay, developing this framework is the first step in beginning to draw accurate conclusions. Those conclusions, if rooted in truth, can be applied to solutions that may finally be able to wear down the patterns etched in stone for the last century. Now, the importance of changing those patterns, okay? This is a necessity to reshape the current ideologies and institutions that perpetuate inequities in American societies or in American cities across the country, okay? Specifically in Detroit's 1967 riot case, what was at stake is the success or the failure of Detroit. It is nearly 900,000 citizens whose city cannot provide adequate opportunities to reaffirm its great city as a forerunner of the American landscape. Now, these are powerful assessments that only reign true because of the lack of progress that so many community leaders are quick, and this is my community, so many community leaders are quick to lie about and say that we've made it because we are in a post-racial America. But stuff like this, there's research out there that examines the nexus between deindustrialization, racism, and the urban crisis that many term as the Negro problem in the past, and they, term it as a Negro problem in America. Now, like I said, I had this PDF. If you want to see it, I would suggest you read it, because you read it, it will give you a glimpse into Detroit. And then you have to study the history of Detroit, and you go look at some documentaries revolved around Detroit. And then you got to look at Chicago as differently, because they have some of the same issues, but the reason why is inevident when you start studying the history of Chicago and some of the things that happened. Okay, now, had to get to that. That was supposed to be done last week, but I wanted to hit on deindustrialization because we never have a discussion on deindustrialization. Okay. This week, we're going to finish up trying to talk about what Dr. Cress Welsing was addressing. Now, returning to what she was saying, her observations, she stated that if the mother is forced to be the breadwinner as well as the giver of emotional support, you will see emotional supports go wanting. And I think what she was trying to say was that, you know, the changing of the role of the mother and forcing her to now step into not only the role of not only as the giver of emotional support, but now she has to step into the step into the role of becoming the provider, right? And this additional responsibility changes the psychological aspects, and it's deep with this now. It changes psychological aspects of the mother within the family structure, as well as it's changing the physical aspects of the family structure. So know that there's going to be change, okay? Now, change creates a great deal of instability, or should I say that there's a great deal of instability that is present within change. Either way, you can take either one, okay? But it's common knowledge that within the business culture, and I understand this because I study business, those of you do like to talk money, so here we are at this point, we're talking about business. Now, those of you who understand business culture, you know that it's very common knowledge that excessive change in an organization can lead to a lack of alignment with the organization's long-term goals, right? So what do you think it does to a family? So we can assume that, we can assume and be safe with, with the assumption that change within a family structure can also lead to a lack of alignment with those long-term goals. It's what I said earlier when I was talking to Amber, right? Talking about what a pattern, setting a pattern does. Now, with that agreed upon, that being agreed upon by the mother and the father, right? Business practices consider the fact that it's important to have balance, okay, between what is defined as change and what is defined as stability. So not only does an organization attempt to identify what type of change is on the way, but I do believe that there is a risk management assessment. I know there's a risk management assessment at the time when I actually addressed this. I know there's a risk management assessment that's always considered whenever change is inevitable, okay? Or if upon the future business of the organization can see this change, there's tools they use. Now, if you study the management of organizational change, and that's all you gotta do is just Google that, and you should find some tools that pop up. So Google study or Google the management of organizational change. And then you're going to find that the business uses one of the tools that they use is called key performance indicators. Okay, and they use that to quantifiably measure growth. Okay, they use that to measure the growth of a business or an organization. The most known that will sound familiar to you if I say it right now is ROI, or return on investment. Okay, we understand this. If you're in the dating market, you're in the dating game, you understand that at some point, there's a return on investment. I'm not going to get into details of why or exactly, because that's a different conversation. But return on investment is the profit from an activity or a particular period compared with the amount invested in the activity itself. Okay. Now, what is the return on investment of removing the father from the home? That's a question that I want. I want everybody. I'm serious. I want the answer to that. I want your opinion on that. What is the return on investment of removing the father from the home? Okay. I even want the older people community in there on that. Ask grandma. Okay. All right. Another key performance indicator that is used is called CLV. That's the customer lifetime value. Now, the customer lifetime value is the calculation of how much profit a business can make from one customer over a whole period that they remain a customer. And we know this is commonly, we know this to be like a subscription. How much money is Netflix going to make from you, from your membership? They're going to keep billing you all every month. And then they want, for this whole season, they're going to be submitting certain shows to keep you hooked. Netflix did that to me with The Witcher. I want to see The Witcher, sign up for The Witcher, watched maybe 2 seasons. All of a sudden, now they're talking about changing the characters up. And I'm just looking at most of the shows that, this is HBO, Netflix, everything. Most of the shows that are really interesting, I like, they love canceling. And this is why I don't stick with them. I end up bouncing. There was a show, I can't remember it, but it was based on the movie with Tyrese. I can't remember. can't remember the names right now. But I do believe it was based on the war in heaven coming to Earth, or the apocalypse coming to Earth. And they canceled. They had a series, a TV series, and it was really good. After the first or second season, they canceled. And then I just, I was like, nope, I'm done. I'm not watching this. Anyway, this as subscription. All right. Customer lifetime value. Now, what is the calculated profit that one parent can make as a single parent over the whole period that they remain a single parent? And is that more profitable than the two-parent household? Why is that question not answered? Why is that question not asked? What is the calculated profit that one parent can make as a single parent over a whole period that they remain a single parent? And what is more profitable? Is it the single parent household or the two-parent household? I mean, I think we all know this answer, but do we see anybody ever quantify that? Do we ever see anybody even try to all those questions are and more are extremely relevant, okay? And they should have been taken into consideration when considering or planning to remove the father from the family structure. But check this out. Before an organization expands internationally, it considers economic principles such as exchange rates, inflation trends, interest rates, cost of production, domestic, international policies even. Okay, all of those factors are what's assessed when an organization has the plan to counter any risk to its profitability, right? So I got to ask this question. All right, what are the considerations when the father and the traditional provider is removed from the family structure? Does the family member that is assuming the position of head of household develop a plan to counter the risk for the family's survivability? And I know they don't, but there's something that tries to do in that support system. But we're going to go and going to get off. I want to continue. Are the economy's inflation trends considered before the father is removed from the home? No, because if it was, then you wouldn't be running back to the court to do a modification in child support. Okay. Are the economy's interest rates considered before the fathers are removed from the home? I was just talking to another mother about the current rate that the housing market is right now and what a house will be on average, what it will be when my children become adults. And my son is already 18, so he's already there basically, right? Is that considered? And I'm just trying to make a sense of this whole conversion or this exchange that that happens when these Black fathers are removed out of the home. Now, Melanie King, next week I hope to cover that, but she acknowledged that the women made a trade-off, and she said they made a trade-off with the men for a check. All right, but we'll discuss that because she's going to be talking about, we'll do that more next week because she's going to be talking about comments where she's talking about the social pressure of third wave feminism. Okay, now getting back to this change we're talking about, a change that looms upon the future of a business is equal to the change that looms upon the or the future of the family structure. All right, it is just as important of a part of our society as the change of the structure of society itself. Okay, so when you make these changes, you're changing society. You can argue about that. You can't deny that one. All right, that's a fact. You change the family, you change the family structure, you change society. Not only are the father and the mother of the family constantly at the mercy of growth of the entire family, which that growth is always in flux. Parents know what I'm talking about. Sounds like Greek to some people who are not parents, but trust me, parents know what I'm talking about. All right, they're always at the mercy of the growth of the entire family, facing potential danger of that family being subjected to the disintegration that's a result of a divorce or the repercussions that that a death of the member of the family can do. And remember that danger of a death, right, is a sales point for life insurance. And I think they even I know they have marriage insurance now. So both of those, we talk about the death of a family or how the family would disintegrate because of divorce, they make an insurance sales points for that. So that should tell you something, right? Then you have to really consider the human trafficking element the abduction of a child, right? And what that can do to a family structure, right? Are we really not thinking about the dangers that are prevalent in our society like we should? I recently posted a video on my personal Facebook page of a social experiment where there was a child walking on a busy public sidewalk. And there's a guy who runs up to the child. It's on my page right now. There's a guy who runs up to the child. He grabs the child with his hand covering the child's mouth or whatever, and he picks the child up and starts running into a dark alley between these two buildings, right? He does it several times because it's a social experiment. But everyone was walking by that was witnessing that event. They just went on about their day without question what they had just witnessed. Apparently, it's that easy, is what the video was trying to show, right? When we think about that, what about the effects of human trafficking upon a family structure? If a child is kidnapped, what does that do? What does that do to that nuclear family? Is blame handed back and forth between the mother and the father? How does it work? What if it's a blended family and then someone gets kidnapped or whatnot? Does the other parent resent another parent because they still have their child, or vice versa? And we're supposed to think that when we think about all that now, right? And we're supposed to think that removing the father from a family structure is normal. And we're supposed to think that the normalization of a family without his father, that's okay, right? But I just want to point that out. I know we're getting to an hour. I'm thinking about cutting it short, but still, I just want everybody to think about that. Those were deep questions that I've always asked myself in one form or another. And I just wonder about that. And I keep hearing this narrative that Black fathers don't want to be in the home. Specifically, I keep hearing this narrative of Black fathers. I don't hear it from white fathers, and probably wouldn't care if I did hear it from them. But here's what I'm hearing from Black fathers. It's a narrative that makes us look bad. When you pull up the statistics and you look at a relationship or the chances of a successful relationship, and you look at statistics for Black fathers or Black men, period, it's the lowest for success. Okay? Now, someone's going to ask why. Well, they actually do ask why. But that one they ask why, but others, they don't ask why. They just take the numbers and run with it, right? But we got to ask why. Does this mean that Black fathers are not adequate? What do you mean by that? Not adequate, right? So when looking at society, Aristotle's, we start talking about Aristotle's view and his political instability, or his view that political instability is generally the result of a situation in where, check this out, the distribution of wealth fails to correspond with the distribution of political power. One can also see that removing the provider from the family structure removes power and influence from the father and redistributes the wealth or redistributes that influence and power to the mother, right? Some don't see that problem. Some don't see a problem in that. And I know I've had 2 discussions with some other single mothers or whatever, and they don't see a problem in it, right? But that's exactly why we have to have the conversation. That's exactly why it should be at the front, okay? Not this whole cheesecake factory of where you taking me, you got to spend $500 on the first date. Some fail to see the true value of a father. That's just a fact. And fathers, how active they are within the family structure. A strong father in a healthy perspective, playing an active role within the family structure, makes the family healthy, and it also strengthens the mothers in other ways. Okay, we don't have time to really go into those ways right now. Okay, but some try to argue that the government social insurance programs adequately supplement the influence and the power of a father. But I enthusiastically challenge that narrative. And I say, so you admit it, right? You admit that you believe it's healthy to substitute the government for the role of husband. If you believe that the government social insurance programs, or let me go ahead and say it because I said it last week, welfare, if you feel that it can supplement, the influence and the power of a father, you're admitting that you believe it's healthy to substitute the government for the role of husband. So for those individuals who say, no, that's never happened, that's not why the Black family is broken up, blah, blah, blah. Keep in mind the people who are thinking that way today, currently, and I know two that think this way, okay? I'm not gonna call them out. I'm just saying that's how bad it is. That's how relevant it is. Two that live here in Broward County. Okay. Again, that's what Melanie King reiterated about what happened, in the past to help create, what is we're terming here, or it's urban crisis, the urban crisis of Black fathers not being in the home. We've long past acknowledged that Black fathers not being in the family structure is a fundamental community need. Okay, that's why we talked about this. Remember, we did the community demands a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago, actually. We did the community demands. It was before July. Okay, we did a community demands 3, and we talked about the needs, the greatest needs of the Black community. One was adult, one was Black literacy. Okay, another was Black fathers. Remember, that was number one answer, really, because it was everybody was saying the Black fathers, right? So it was Black fathers, and we associate that with the Black on Black crime, right? So we talk about the community's needs. So we need Black fathers to be in the home. So we got to understand what this is, right? So in order to fix all that, we got to address this way of thinking. This way of thinking that it's okay to substitute the father. You're automatically, when you contemplate substituting the father, you already show that there's no value in that. Now, ask these fathers, what about, can you substitute the mother? I'm pretty sure we'll be thinking like, no, not really. We don't even want to go through that journey. Some people have to make that journey. Okay. You don't want to, you don't have a discussion with them. Okay. But we must address this way of thinking that substituting the government and the government subsidies for the role of a husband, here's again, not just the role of a father, the role of a husband. Okay. Wow. But we have to address that way of thinking, that they think that government subsidies can supplant the role of a husband, and that it has no negative consequences on the future for the mother, okay, for the wife. All right. This replacement of wealth and power does not even adequately deal with the adjustments of the children after the father's removed. That's where we miss a lot. Okay. This is only looking at the issue from the mother's financial perspective when we talk about the government subsidies, right? If that balance of father as the breadwinner, mother as a primary emotional support, and there's other titles to that. There's other things that they other roles they play. But like I said, as father is the breadwinner or the provider, mother is the primary emotional support of the developing child, is not there and it's not in place, you can produce, like Dr. Cress Welsing said, symptoms of depression in children. Why? Because it's well documented that a mother gives children comfort and emotional security when a child is in distress. And she can do that sometimes through examples like, through physical touch and soft words of affirmation. Okay. When a mother is now put into the role of provider, as well as her retaining her role of primary giver of emotional support, it often overburdens her and shifts the responsibility or the ability of her to be attentive to the specific needs of the children. That's what she meant when she said the children go wanting. Okay. And sometimes those needs are for the children to be expressive in ways that may not be received by the father in a nurturing manner, or at least perceived in a nurturing manner. Now, what all of that I just stated just proves to you, this whole conversation is very in depth. Okay. I'm probably going to cut it short because this is enough to chew on. What that proved is that those roles that I previously stated, just those two simple roles, as father is the provider, mother is the primary provider of emotional support for the developing child. If those roles, they're currently devalued and they're underestimated, severely underestimated. Now, here's the most important and non-debatable attribute. I talked about this last week. That's provided by the mother. Okay. Here's the most important and the most non-debatable attribute that's provided by the mother. It's unconditional love. Remember I told you that last week? You hear it. You hear when people say that they possess the face that only a mother could love. See how common that is? You hear that all the time. Yeah, that's a show of unconditional love. And that one's easy. I gave you that last week. That one's easy because it's always referred to, and I'll accept that answer. Okay. I wholeheartedly accept that answer. Okay. And I think that's only debatable when you compare how men or fathers value respect as synonymous with love. We can debate that. Okay. Here's the opportunity that I forewarned everybody about. Okay. I told you I would give you a chance. This is what this was for. Here's the last little bit of time. Okay. Before I conclude this one real quick, and then we'll just resume next week. But here's this time that I'm setting aside for all you single mothers out there, everybody who was debating this. Okay. I told you I set aside you some time for the live viewing audience to contribute in what you feel are the most notable qualities or the most notable abilities that mothers exclusively, that only mothers exclusively can contribute to the family structure. And then I'm just ask this question: what do you think should be weighed as heavily as much as that unconditional love that I just mentioned? I want the answers to that. Okay, and I'm just gonna conclude this part, but I'm just gonna roll through. You go ahead and you put it in the comment section. Okay, even if you're viewing this later, put it in the comment section. It's, we need to know what other qualities or capabilities do you think that mothers exclusively provide to the family structure? And I'm not debating it as in you don't provide it. I want to know. I want to see you participate and put a list in there. Okay, so no more of this inbox. I'll tell you in my inbox note. Put it right there in the comment section in the past. Otherwise, I'm not going to recognize it if it comes in the inbox that way. I want you to answer these questions here. All right. This is a way that we can elaborate on, and give respect to each other as far as sex roles or gender-based roles. Should I say that? Because when I say sex and gender, everybody's going to say that's different, blah, blah, blah. You know what I'm trying to communicate. I'm saying what the mother provides, what the father provides. I'll list next week what the fathers provide. I'll give you prime examples in videos. You give me right now what you think the mothers provide. Okay, what you know the mothers provide. All right, there are psychological functions that can be hashed out throughout, and we can further debate those, right? But I don't believe we need to drive further down that road tonight. That road of emotional support. We already know that many, I'll give you an example of why I know this is important. Veterans use, for their mental health needs, some of the veterans, they use emotional support animals. So if an animal can be used as an emotional support, how important is emotional support for a child? So that shows us just how important providing emotional support is to a human being. But if we get back to Dr. Welsing's assessment about the kids, she said that the children go wanting. And that means that in some way, the mother starts falling short with some of the emotional support. And that's likely only because she's focusing more of her effort into the provider role. And at the same time, the children's needs grow over time as they grow physically and they grow emotionally. Now, I stated that earlier, that the father and the mother are constantly at the mercy of the growth of the entire family. And that's a critical point of knowledge that cannot be argued against. As the children grow, so too their needs. The needs undoubtedly evolve. And when you, as the parent, start to think that your job is done, you start to relax. And that's when you tend to overlook, the fact that, a new need tends to arise, requiring new resolutions and further outlook. I know this personally because, like I said, I thought, okay, we got a little this, we're going to do this for the kids or whatever today. And then all of a sudden someone says, oh, Dad, the bike pump doesn't work. It's broken. So now we got to go buy a new bike pump. And I'm thinking like, wow, wow, always those new needs. Always those new needs, okay? So as I said, the father and the mother of the family are always constantly at the mercy of the growth of the entire family. You've heard this before. It's said that it's, commonly we say in society as a little adage, a little, comment, we always say a mother's job is never done. So if you know that, if you know the mother's job is never done, why would you inundate a mother with the additional traditional role of the father, the role of provider, and then you would still believe that the consequences would be minimal, or the consequences would be so insignificant that there would be no impact on the future of the family structure? Answer that question. I really want feedback on this. If you know that a mother's job is never done, why would you inundate the mother with additional traditional role of the father and believe that the consequences would be minimal or so insignificant that there would be no impact on the future of that family structure? This is where the conversation, I'll end it tonight, but this is where the conversation can divulge into the history of how Black African American family structure survived colonization. All right. We survived Jim Crow. And then we're fighting our way through the feminism, right? And it's had an impact on Black family structure. We'll debate that next week. We'll talk about that next week. We're gonna dive right into where it came from. But we just hashed out all these questions I just hashed out. All these questions I just asked. We got to put some critical thinking towards these trade-offs that happen. And the mothers who did it need to be questioned. Those who don't think that the mothers, made that trade-off, get the information together. Prove to me they didn't. Because I'm going to tell you this, empirical evidence here. I'm going to tell you this. What's the rules for Section 8? I might gather those next week and post them just so you can see them. What's the rules currently for Section 8? Why are they mandating that the father not be in the home? They're not trying to put families together, right? So when we talk about the crime that's committed, who's causing it? Now, I know there's a certain level of personal responsibility when they actually conduct the crime. I get that. Some of these youth, but we know youth do dumb things. We know they do just crazy things. When you watch a kid as they grow up, you watch them do some weird stuff, okay? But as a father, you have to have some room for growth and you have to discipline them along the way, right? So we can automatically see, just me saying that, I've already established clearly, we've been talking about the mothers, we ain't talked about the fathers really, but you can see where the fathers provide. You can see where that can be used to mitigate some of the crime that's created by these, what they call juvenile delinquents, right? I know it's a very fine line between the crime and then the crime that's committed by the youth, okay? Because we'll get into some of the ones that's committed by adults, but I think we always saw that. You guys do that because you tend to, no matter who does what, you look up their history and then you try to justify it. So when we talk about these kids, why are they doing that? That's the question I hear in Brevard County the most, particularly from a few white women. And they ask me that all the time. So I'm getting the information, feedback. That's what's necessary. I don't want to hear or see anybody in my inbox with some garbage. Get in that comment section. You got questions, I'll answer them next week. And I'll continue on, but we're going to dive right into the heart of some of the history and how it's had an impact on our culture. And don't say that it doesn't have that impact. Don't need to get in here with that. Like I said again, we look at what American slavery has done to the African American diet. And the Thanksgiving that don't go by and everybody's talking about greens, beans, potatoes, pig feet, pig ears, hog jaw. All that stuff is what? Parts of the pig that the slave owner didn't want. So when they got the good stuff, when they got the pork chops, that's what we got. The leftovers. Put them in a pot, stir them up, create a delicacy, spice them up so to the point that it's now a staple in African American families, in the African American households. So I just want to just say that I need to get that information out. We need to cover that. I want to cover deindustrialization to complete what we talked about last week, because we did talk about how the jobs and how that situation and the narrative of African American men being lazy and stuff like that or whatever. And then there was a part in the narrative that said that because black dads didn't, black fathers at that time couldn't get jobs, and we covered that what Jim Crow had done, systemic racist policies, unofficial policies even at that. How they weren't allowed to indulge in a fair wage, let alone if they were even given a job. And then most of the work that they were given were menial tasks They were working. You seen that image of them in Bellevue, Florida? Was it Belgrade, Florida, where they were basically there in the labor camps. That's like what is it called now? It used to be called like True Blue, but it was like Labor Ready or something. What do they call it now? But that's, we still see some of that today. Okay. So I just wanted to state that. My point to bring this to you was because there's a very serious issue. I'm always getting asked that question, and I very rarely ever get, feedback or about the actual resolutions. And like I said, when I did that community demands, I was dead serious. I brought up the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and say, hey, this is what what the black community needs. You said that they need black fathers in the home, so now we're addressing it. So now if you were up there just talking away and using racist negative narratives, it's your chance. It's your chance for me to be objective with you, whatever. State what you got to state. Don't be scared. Anyway, I'd like to thank everybody for participating. Amber, thank you as always. You always there. I appreciate you for everything that you do and how you contribute. I appreciate you that much more. And I hope that everything is going well for you. I know that you had a situation. I will highlight that hopefully in the future about some of the issues. Just let everybody know she dealt with some stuff with her son encountered a very racist individual in the military. So, yeah, it's in there. Okay, it's in there. I know so. All right. So, but I'll try to see if I can share that with the rest of the community so they can see that. And next week, I'm going to give you guys a heads up. There's some strong language in next week. Some of the clips I'm going to show it, etc. I don't have the necessary tools that can quickly put these things together and then strip some of the curse words out or whatnot. I actually have something that, but it takes too long. I don't have that time. I'm a single dad. I'm always on hustle. I'm always working. So if you want and you feel like you're very strongly about the language that's used and you want me to strip that, then we're talking about money. All right. And I don't want to ask you guys for money. What I want to ask you guys is an exchange of information. That's all I want. That's the only currency I'm really interested in because that's what changes behaviors. That's what actually produces the results or the resolutions that we're looking for, the tangible solutions that we're looking for. So I just want to thank everybody for participating. I appreciate you guys for listening to me for an hour and 14 minutes. I'm going to wrap it up tonight and I'll conclude next week. Hopefully we can get through this, but a lot of important questions and stuff. I need everybody to watch this, send it to your friends, share that, say, hey, he asked some questions or whatever. I want you to try to go in on me. I want you to put the information down there. So I thank you guys. I will see you guys next week. As always, love, peace. May the Most High guide your path.